Hey stranger. Why have you been hiding out in your cubicle so much lately?
I've been glued to news feeds, discovering what a giant freaking mess the world is in.
Really? What has been happening?
Where should I begin? The US dollar is collapsing, the European Union is falling apart financially, the world's energy future is MIA, banks are closing left and right, with 5,000 more to go, and most people I've talked to have no idea, because mainstream media barely addresses any of it.
Wait, slow down. Where have you been hearing all this nonsense? Have you been listening to right-wing talk radio?
No.
Late night AM radio?
No.
Conspiracy theory websites?
No.
Are voices in your head telling you things?
Not lately.
Then where have you been getting these crazy stories from?
Bloomberg.com, Yahoo News, Investors Business Daily, Businessweek.com, the UK Telegraph, The Drudge Report, and a handful of established finance experts.
And they are the ones saying all of these things.
You better believe it. Every day, there are new developments in each story. I've lost all interest in primetime TV. This is way more interesting. Unfortunately, this is all real, and it affects real people, so it's both riveting and depressing.
Why haven't I heard about these matters in depth on the evening news? Shouldn't everyone be aware of these things? The news reporting that I listen to has been saying that unemployment is coming down, and the US economy is coming back up.
Where are you hearing this?
NPR and the daily newspaper. What they're saying must be true.
Here's what is true. Did you know that the Canadian dollar is now worth as much as the American dollar?
I think you're a little confused. The Canadian dollar is only worth about 80 cents American.
Not anymore. The US dollar and Canadian dollar are now within 1 cent of each other, and the Australian dollar is just a few cents behind us.
When did that happen? How did it happen?
It's a long story, but to sum it up, the Federal Reserve is creating money that doesn't really exist to buy up US debt so that the government can deficit spend against money that was created out of thin air. Basically, government debt is being rolled into an artificially expanded money supply, and that makes the money worth less and less by the minute.
You can't be serious.
Meanwhile, in Europe, Greece is in economic collapse and took a bailout, Ireland is in economic collapse and took a bailout, and now Spain, Portugal, and Italy are quietly forming a line. Their debts and bailouts are small compared to the size of our economic nightmare over here, but the EU is in trouble, and everyone in the developed world, except for the average American, is aware of it.
I know Britain has racked up quite a few pounds.
Almost 1 trillion, but they claim they can still burn it off.
So, did you also say something about energy production? I did hear that the IEA is calling for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, which will reduce demand.
The IEA just released their report with projections for supply and demand over the next 25 years, but they don't measure up to reality, especially in the case of developing economies like India and China. Its projections for supply are largely contingent on, and I'm quoting here, fields yet to be developed and fields yet to be found. The IEA is telling the world that oil sources which don't currently exist will somehow be fully developed as our primary source of production within 25 years, for a larger world demand in which developing nations are expected to cut back during a period of expansion. I'll send you a link.
So what about the banks?
U.S. banks will close 5,000 branches within the next 18 months, and possibly close another 5,000 by 2015. Good luck finding an ATM. Meanwhile, the FDIC is also closing a long list of banks who exaggerated their asset values and were found to be insolvent. The FDIC has closed 149 banks so far this year, 311 since 2007, and absorbed most of the losses.
Good God! Is anyone solvent anymore?
China is doing pretty well, but don't get me started there. Okay, so the latest news is that China and Russia have decided to ditch the US dollar as reserve currency in their bilateral trade negotiations.
Wait, I did hear something recently about a new standard for world reserve currency.
Right. World Bank President Robert Zola called for a new cooperative money system involving the dollar, the euro, the yen, the pound, and the yuan, using a single international reference point, which, quote, moves toward internationalization, and then an open capital account.
That sounds an awful lot like
a new de facto global reserve currency. Beijing's central bank chief also suggested an alternative money system at the G20 to replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And just today, Putin mused about Russia eventually joining the Eurozone and eclipsing the dollar as reserve currency.
And now China and Russia are dropping the dollar in their own bilateral trading.
Looks like they're trying to kickstart the new trend.
Why wasn't this reported all over mainstream news?
Good question. And why did the Federal Reserve pick this month to start pumping more money into the system? Today is Black Friday, and up to half of the U.S. population will be out pumping their dollars into the system this weekend, and more during the next month, under the illusion that we are better off this year than we've been for the last two. The news isn't telling them anything to the contrary.
If you build it, they will come.
The show must go on. But eventually everyone will have to catch up.
Well, speaking of catching up, I'm going to go hide out in my cubicle and read the links you sent me.
Get a drink later?
Gonna need to. Just one more question. Does anyone else know about these things? I haven't heard anyone else bring this stuff up.
I'll introduce you to a few others. They're a lot like us. A lot.
And can you recommend a consolidated news source or a blog with links to relevant news articles?
Actually, a friend of mine just started a Facebook page called In Tomorrow's News. He's using it to post a few daily links to news and analysis about the economy. I told him he has too much time on his hands and should try sleeping at night.
Oh, unfortunately I just cancelled my Facebook account. Damn cyber stalkers.
No problem, it's a public page that you can read even if you're not registered. I'll send you the link.